You worked for this. You studied for the civics test. You passed the interview. You stood in a courtroom, raised your right hand, and took the oath. That moment felt like the finish line. Safety, permanence, protection. And now, in February 2026, you're lying awake at night watching enforcement footage, hearing words like crackdown and deportation, and suddenly that finish line doesn't feel so permanent anymore. I hear you, and I want you to know, you are not alone in feeling this way. But here's what I also want you to know. There is a massive difference between a louder enforcement environment and an actual legal threat to your citizenship. And today, we're going to close that gap completely. My name is Michael. Welcome to Michael Visa Guide, and this video is going to walk you through exactly what is happening in 2026, what the Constitution actually guarantees you, what denaturalization really is, and what it absolutely is not, and what steps you should or should not be taking right now. This is not about politics. This is about law, rights, and facts. Let's get into it. Let's start with the foundation, because once this part clicks, a lot of the fear starts to dissolve on its own. Under the United States Constitution, citizenship, once lawfully granted, is permanent. Not permanent until the next election. Not permanent unless enforcement ramps up. Permanent. Full stop. That's not a political opinion. That is constitutional law, backed by Supreme Court precedent going back decades. If you completed the naturalization process, met the residency requirements, passed your civics and English exams, disclosed the required information, and took the oath, you are a United States citizen, and you have the exact same constitutional protections as someone who was born here on American soil. Your citizenship is not a visa. It is not a green card. It is not a status you renew. It does not expire, and it cannot be taken away simply because enforcement gets louder or political priorities shift. Executive orders cannot override constitutional protections. Enforcement strategy cannot rewrite the 14th Amendment. Congress cannot pass a simple law tomorrow that strips lawfully naturalized citizens of their status. It doesn't work that way. Citizenship, once properly granted, is one of the most legally secure statuses that exists in American law. Now I want to pause here for a second because something important is happening psychologically for a lot of people. Many naturalized citizens subconsciously carry the anxiety they felt as green card holders into their life as citizens. And that makes sense. As a permanent resident, your status came with conditions, renewal requirements, travel limitations, risk. But citizenship is different. It is final. It is constitutional, not administrative. The rules changed the day you took that oath, even if your nervous system hasn't fully caught up to that yet. Now, and this is where we need to be very precise, there is one narrow legal exception that people hear about and immediately panic over. It's called denaturalization. And just the sound of that word sends people into a spiral because it sounds like the government can simply hit undo on your citizenship. That is not what it means. Denaturalization is a formal legal process. It can only happen in federal court, and it can only happen under very specific circumstances. Specifically, when the government can prove that a person obtained citizenship through fraud or by willfully concealing a material fact during the naturalization process. This is not about political disagreements. It is not about what party you vote for. It is not about criticizing the government or expressing unpopular opinions. It is exclusively about whether your original naturalization was legally valid. To even bring a case, prosecutors would have to prove that someone deliberately lied on their N-400 application, concealed serious criminal history that would have made them ineligible, used a false identity, hid involvement in persecution or terrorism, or omitted information that was legally material to the approval decision. And even then, even if all of that were true, it is not automatic. The government has to file a civil lawsuit. You have the right to legal representation. There is discovery. There are evidentiary standards. There is a judge. The burden of proof is high. And historically, denaturalization cases are rare, time-consuming, and expensive. These are not mass administrative sweeps. These are individualized court proceedings that often take years. Here's why this matters so much right now in 2026. When people hear about aggressive immigration enforcement, some assume citizenship gets pulled into that wave. It doesn't. Denaturalization is not a policy tool that can be casually expanded. The legal standard has not changed. There is no new law lowering the burden of proof. There is no Supreme Court ruling that has weakened constitutional protections for naturalized citizens. Even if an administration wanted to pursue more denaturalization cases tied to proven fraud, it would still be bound by the same constitutional requirements and due process protections that have existed for decades. So when you hear the phrase revoking citizenship, understand what that actually means in practice. It refers to a narrow, court-driven process tied to fraud, not a political lever that can be pulled against law-abiding naturalized Americans. So if citizenship is constitutionally protected and denaturalization is rare and fraud-based, what is actually causing so much unease right now? The answer is enforcement visibility. The current administration has significantly increased immigration enforcement operations. ICE activity is more frequent and more public. Detention policies are stricter. Border enforcement has intensified. Deportations are being prioritized for individuals who are undocumented or who have final removal orders. That shift in visibility changes how communities feel, even when it changes nothing about the legal reality for citizens. When you see workplace raids on the news, when you hear about large-scale removal operations, when social media amplifies every enforcement story, it creates the impression that the entire immigration landscape is crumbling beneath your feet. But here's the distinction that changes everything. Enforcement actions target immigration status violations. Naturalized citizens do not have an immigration status. You have citizenship. You are not in the category of people subject to deportation proceedings. You don't need a visa. You don't need to renew anything. Your legal relationship with the United States is fundamentally different from someone who is undocumented, or even from someone who holds a green card. The confusion spreads because immigration policy debates get framed in broad, emotional language. Crackdown on immigrants, strict immigration overhaul, new deportation push. But those phrases collapse multiple legal categories into one headline. A green card holder is not the same as an undocumented immigrant. A visa holder is not the same as a naturalized citizen. Enforcement aimed at unlawful presence does not legally extend to people who have completed naturalization. The tone may be harsher. The enforcement may be more visible. But tone is not law. Visibility is not a constitutional amendment. Intensity does not rewrite citizenship protections. Now let's take down 3 specific claims that are circulating right now, because misinformation thrives in environments like this. Claim 1. Mass denaturalization is coming, and the government is preparing to strip citizenship from large numbers of naturalized Americans. There is no legal mechanism for this. No new legislation authorizes it. No constitutional change allows it. Denaturalization requires individualized federal court proceedings tied to fraud. It cannot be executed in bulk through administrative action. Period. Claim 2. Certain nationalities or religious groups are being targeted for citizenship revocation. Immigration enforcement priorities can focus on specific geographic regions or security concerns, yes, but denaturalization cases must be grounded in fraud or material misrepresentation, not race, not religion, not ethnicity, not political belief. Targeting citizenship revocation on those grounds would be unconstitutional and would be challenged immediately in federal court. Claim 3. Naturalized citizens need to take urgent, dramatic protective steps right now, renouncing prior citizenship, filing special paperwork, paying for protection services, or registering with organizations promising to safeguard your status. None of that is necessary. Your citizenship is protected by the Constitution, not by additional filings or private services. And I want to be direct here. Fear-based businesses multiply during times of uncertainty because fear creates opportunity. Be very cautious of anyone asking you to pay money to protect something that is already legally protected. Now let's talk about what you actually should do. Not because your citizenship is in danger, but because clarity becomes even more powerful when you know how to operate inside it. First, secure your documentation. Keep your naturalization certificate somewhere safe. Make physical copies. Scan it digitally and back it up. This isn't because someone is randomly going to question your citizenship. It's because having immediate access to proof eliminates stress if you ever need to apply for a passport, sponsor a family member, or verify your status for any reason. Organization is a form of peace of mind. Second, know your rights, not as a formality, but really know them. You have full constitutional protections. You cannot be deported. You can travel on a U.S. passport. You can vote. You can petition for family members. You have the right to due process. These rights are enforceable, and sometimes simply reviewing what citizenship legally grants you restores a sense of stability that headlines can temporarily shake. Third, if you have family members who are lawful permanent residents and are eligible to naturalize, this is an important moment to encourage them to apply. Green card holders are strong, but they are not citizens. They can still face removal proceedings under certain circumstances. They have residency requirements to maintain. They are subject to immigration enforcement rules in ways that citizens are not. Naturalization provides finality, and that finality is particularly meaningful in a high-enforcement climate. Now let's talk about the harder, more emotional part of the picture: family. If you have undocumented relatives, the current environment is not favorable for ignoring that reality. Enforcement is active. Deportations are happening. Undocumented status carries real vulnerability right now. Hoping the visibility will fade is not a strategy. That doesn't mean panic. It means consultation. There may be pathways someone hasn't fully explored: adjustment through family, humanitarian protections, waivers, cancellation of removal, or other forms of relief depending on the specific facts. But those options are highly case-specific and require a licensed immigration attorney to evaluate properly. Guesswork and internet advice are genuinely dangerous in this climate. If you're sponsoring a relative from abroad, understand that family-based immigration remains legal. But processing times may lengthen, scrutiny may increase, and policy adjustments could affect categories or numerical caps. Delaying unnecessarily can sometimes mean facing stricter standards later. And if you travel internationally as a naturalized citizen, always travel on your U.S. passport. The United States recognizes dual citizenship, but some countries do not. If you return to your country of origin, be aware of that country's laws around dual nationality, taxation, or military obligations. None of that affects your U.S. citizenship, but they are practical realities worth understanding before you board a plane. The bigger picture here is this: your citizenship is stable, but your family's immigration situations may still require real attention. Stability at the top of the ladder does not automatically secure every rung beneath it. Being proactive, not fearful, but proactive, is the most constructive response to this environment. Now, the question I know a lot of you are sitting with: do I need an immigration attorney right now? For most naturalized citizens with straightforward histories, the honest answer is no. If you obtained citizenship lawfully, disclosed what you were required to disclose, and have not been contacted by any federal agency regarding fraud or misrepresentation, there is no preventive filing you need to make. No special paperwork. No defensive step required. Citizenship doesn't need maintenance. It doesn't need renewal. However, there are specific situations where consulting a licensed immigration attorney absolutely makes sense. If you're sponsoring a family member and the case involves prior overstays, removal orders, criminal history, or complex waivers, get professional guidance. If you have undocumented relatives trying to assess their options, that evaluation must be individualized by someone qualified to do it. And if you ever receive formal communication from USCIS, the Department of Justice, or any federal agency questioning past immigration representations, that is the moment to seek counsel immediately. Not tomorrow, immediately. When I say attorney, I mean a licensed immigration lawyer, someone admitted to practice law, ideally with a specific focus on immigration, and ideally connected to reputable organizations like the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Be cautious of anyone guaranteeing outcomes. Be cautious of large upfront cash demands without written agreements. Be cautious of notarios or consultants presenting themselves as attorneys when they are not licensed to practice law. Immigration fraud increases during periods of uncertainty because fear creates opportunity. A real attorney will evaluate your facts, explain your risks honestly, and never promise impossible results. Now I want to talk about something that won't show up in any statute or court ruling, but is very real for a lot of you watching this: emotional residue. Many naturalized citizens carry years, sometimes decades, of immigration-related stress. You remember what it felt like to wait for visa approvals, to obsessively check your case status, to worry that one missing document could derail everything you'd worked toward. That psychological imprint doesn't disappear the moment you receive your certificate of naturalization. So when enforcement headlines surge, even if your logical brain fully understands that your citizenship is secure, your nervous system may react differently. You might feel a flash of that old vulnerability. You might question something that is legally completely settled. That reaction doesn't mean you misunderstand the law. It means you lived through years of uncertainty. Give yourself credit for that. You navigated a complex legal system. You met every requirement. You earned this. The anxiety you felt in earlier stages of the immigration process was rational then. But your legal status has fundamentally changed. You are no longer in a provisional category. And if the current climate is reactivating old fears despite you knowing the facts, lean into community. Talk to other naturalized citizens. Connect with immigrant advocacy organizations that provide accurate updates. And if the stress feels overwhelming, there is absolutely no weakness in seeking counseling support to process it. Security is not only a legal condition, it is also a psychological one, and both matter. Here's the clearest way I can put the big picture together for you. Political climate can shift quickly. Enforcement priorities can intensify. Rhetoric can get sharper. Media coverage can amplify every single enforcement action. But constitutional structure moves slowly, deliberately, with high barriers to change. And citizenship lives inside that structure. It is anchored in the 14th Amendment and reinforced by decades of Supreme Court precedent. That foundation does not move with each election cycle. So when you hear sweeping language about immigration crackdowns, remember, those policies operate within legal categories. Undocumented status, visa violations, removal orders, asylum eligibility. Citizenship is a different category entirely. And if you naturalized lawfully and honestly, there is no hidden mechanism waiting to undo that. No executive shortcut. No quiet administrative sweep. No 2026 statute that has quietly rewritten the rules. The legal standard remains fraud or willful concealment of material fact, proven in federal court with full due process protections. Here is what we know for certain. Immigration enforcement in 2026 is visible and active. Deportations of undocumented individuals are occurring. Border and detention policies have tightened. Policy debates around asylum, work visas, and family-based immigration are ongoing. But none of those developments alter the permanence of lawfully obtained naturalized citizenship. If you answered your application truthfully, met the eligibility requirements, and took that oath, your citizenship is secure under the Constitution. That is not optimism. That is legal fact. So the path forward is not panic. It is awareness. Stay informed through reliable sources. USCIS, the State Department, reputable legal organizations, licensed immigration attorneys. Keep your documents organized. Encourage eligible family members to naturalize. Seek professional advice when situations are genuinely complex. And allow yourself, truly allow yourself, to live inside the stability you earned. You have the right to vote. You have the right to hold a U.S. passport. You have the right to petition for family members. You have the right to live here without fear of deportation. Those rights are not symbolic. They are enforceable. And understanding them fully is one of the most powerful responses you can have to a noisy political environment. If this video helped cut through the noise and gave you something solid to stand on, subscribe to Michael Visa Guide. That's what we do here. Fact-based, clear, calm immigration guidance, especially in moments when anxiety spreads faster than accurate information. Share this with someone who needs it, because sometimes clarity spreads one conversation at a time. And if there's a specific claim you've heard or a topic you want me to cover next, drop it in the comments. I read them, and your questions shape what we cover next. Thank you for being here. Now go live in the security you earned.